tell and Rudy, go tell and Rudy, go tell and Rudy that everybody's.
Resident Evil 7 is a mostly fun game. It's creepy, with both atmospheric horror and some well-placed jump scares. I also love the setting, a house with several areas you explore several times over, each time with a new purpose and something else to watch out for. And even though you're exploring much of the same geography multiple times, you're still always on guard. The slow, lumbering walk-run pace, and the long animations tied to opening doors or even standing up after a long jump deliberately add to that uneasy feeling. You always feel like something is right in front of or behind you. The game actually uses your familiarity with a portion of the house to give what I think was the biggest jump scare. And I want to emphasize how much I love this game, so let's get specific. But before I do that, let's get the spoiler warning out of the way. I'm going to be discussing the game's entire story, so it'll make more sense if you played it yourself. I think it'll be understandable if you haven't played, but it really is worthwhile to experience this game on your own, and this video is written for people who are familiar with the entire game. That said, here are some things I loved. I love the theme song. It's creepy and sets up the atmosphere extremely well. I love the sound design. Footfalls sound in far-off places. Lights blink on and off. If they didn't get this right, it would have resulted in not really feeling like you're in these environments. Luckily, they nailed it. The boss battles are appropriately frustrating. They're loud and quick-paced, which is unsettling in a game that is almost always quiet and slow-paced. I love the VHS tapes. They're oddly calming, since you know Ethan is safe, but still nerve-wracking because anything could happen. Continuing with the VHS tapes, one is used for the most ingenious puzzle of the game. You have to solve a puzzle first as the internet show host, whose name I keep forgetting because he's forgettable. The puzzle ends with the character dying, but when you're forced to solve it as Ethan, you can basically cheat your way through. This was just fantastic. There's more, but I hope it's clear how much I enjoyed playing the game. I played it first in December 2018, then again recently almost a year later in October 2019. This time I wanted to record my playthrough, and I thought the game wouldn't be as enjoyable since it would have lost some of its mystery, but goddamn if I wasn't completely engaged yet again. But I'm about to be critical of the game, and I want you to remember that I can be critical of media even when I love it. That sounds familiar. Because the story itself is problematic, specifically the last half of the game, in which I think many people agree the game devolves into an on-rails shooting galleries and new, not-so-interesting environments. This is bad enough, but it's worse that the last half actually changes how I view the vastly superior first half of the game, and not for the better. So let's start near the end. Firstly, I chose to save Mia when given the choice, so I'm not really sure how the game plays out if you choose to save Zoe. I meant to keep a save around so I can go and see for myself, but then I forgot and saved over my old save file. Whoops. So after you save Mia, you soon come upon a wrecked boat, and are separated from each other, which leads to the second portion of the game where you control Mia. I generally like this part, at least at first, because it relied on atmosphere to keep you unsettled. Mia didn't have any weapons, so you were left underprepared in case of any kind of attack. Then you get the flashback. Surprise! Mia was a government operative with military training tasked with delivering Evelyn, the youngest of the Baker clan and the true source of evil, to Secret Government Compound, or SGC for short. In this section, Mia has a machine gun and remote bombs. The boat is still creepy, but now you've got the upper hand, which is fine at first, but you have the upper hand for the rest of the game now, and it becomes a pretty boilerplate shooter at this point. So the problem is the gun, definitely. Up until this point in the game, you've been scrounging for ammo for guns that you had to find in the house, but here you're prepared, and the horror is never the same. But even that would be fine, except... Let's rewind. Ethan is a loser. He's easily the least interesting character in the whole game. Maybe the host of the internet show is worse, though. And he also makes some really weird choices. I mean, I know this kind of stuff is the norm for schlock horror, but after Ethan hears from his wife, who he thought died 3 years ago, he understandably goes to the house he knew she was last at to find her. No calls to the cops, despite the unsettling video footage she sent. Considering the government was involved in the events at the Baker house, this may have ended up to be the right decision, but there's no way for Ethan to know that. Anyway, the gate to the house is locked, so he has to take a path to the woods, which starts with him crouching under a weird idol totem thing littered with dead and rotting flesh. Horse flesh, but still flesh. If this wasn't the time to decide to turn back and call the police, it was, at the very least, the time, if he was trained in firearm use and had a permit to carry a weapon, to go grab his gun from the car. But he doesn't even comment on it. The screen says press C to crouch, and that's it. This isn't the only warning sign he completely ignores on his way to the creepy house that holds his long-thought dead wife. Sticking with Ethan, soon after this he's captured by the Bakers and is sneaking around the house after his escape. He hears knocking and approaches a cop, also the game's only black character. I don't want to write too much on this, since it's already been covered a lot, but the cop, again the game's first and only black character, is quickly murdered when Jack, Daddy, shoves a shovel through his brain. The scene is wonderfully gory, but is also a good clue that not only is Ethan an idiot, but also that the game isn't concerned with things like authenticity, which would be okay if it only meant characters making predictably dumb decisions only characters in a horror story would make, or representation, which is a more troubling offense. The cop, who for some reason came alone, is killed, and no one from the station ever attempts to find out where he is. Don't cops call in their whereabouts and have trackers on their cars? Isn't it a joke how the black characters in horror movies are always the first to die? Was this supposed to be a joke? If it was a poor joke. If it wasn't, well then what the hell? And while I'm on it, the use of a woman in a wheelchair to scare the player is also some pretty regressive crap. Don't get me wrong, it was definitely unnerving to see her show up in random places, but using disability as shorthand for horror is troubling. Anyway, I don't want to harp on too much about this. I understand that the game is going for camp, and characters in camp horror always do stupid things. Just... I wish these tropes weren't here. The cop being murdered is followed by an appropriately tense battle with Jack, in which you hop in a car and drive repeatedly into him in a cramped garage. You're shown that Jack is hard to kill, maybe immortal, and given appropriate tools with which to fight him. However, shortly after this, Ethan finds a gun. He has no problem loading and aiming this gun, even though we've had no indication that Ethan has ever been trained in firearm use. At this moment in the game, this is fine. Characters in games don't always need an explanation as to why they can find gun use natural. However, based on my one experience firing a handgun, I wouldn't remember how to load it, and it is much more difficult to aim since gun triggers take a lot more strength than it takes to click a pen, which you wouldn't know from video games, and the gun I used had a laser for aiming. This might also be a good time to mention that Ethan's inborn expertise with guns weakens his character. I kinda like that the main character in this game is a normie, but that character trait doesn't jive well with someone who can pick up a fucking grenade launcher and instantly know how to use it. Now, returning to Mia, we do need a reason for her to be able to use a gun. She has a gun while she's exploring the boat, which again is fine. Video game characters don't need a reason for being able to use a gun if the game's world doesn't set the precedent. But then, the game sets the precedent. We flash back to Mia escorting Evelyn and learn that she's some highly trained government operative. She has a machine gun and can arm remote bombs and all that because she's been trained. Moreover, after the section with Mia, her gun is magically transferred to Ethan, who is now able to use a machine gun with, repeat, no training. And before I continue, I just want to counter the predicted arguments about how I know Ethan isn't trained. Again, he is given multiple opportunities to return to a car for a gun he would have were he trained, and the game gives us no reason to believe he is trained. If one character needs an elaborate backstory to explain why she's able to expertly use a gun, every character needs that same explanation. This could be ignored if every character knew how to use a gun, but Mia's story basically provides a neon sign saying this is not true. This would not, by the way, be fixed if we could use a gun as Mia before we knew about her training. This actually might even make it worse. Which comes to why the game seems to think this is okay. Ethan is a man, Mia is a woman. Men can automatically pick up and use a gun. Women need years of training to do the same. This might sound like a stretch, but I think this kind of thinking has been ingrained into our thoughts through years of conditioning and seeing men blast their way through situations in order to protect, save, or avenge women. So it's not a case of Capcom intentionally setting out to demean women, but of simply accepting what is considered to be normal without questioning that idea of normal. And we don't have to look hard for other signs of sexism in the game. We're able to examine Zoe's bra for some reason, and Ethan's motivation is to rescue his damsel in distress. The game actually seems like it might turn that trope on its head, but backs away and doubles down instead. More on that later. And it's especially frustrating because the game definitely gets it right at times. So let's look at the garage battle against Jack, right after he kills the cop. Ethan is stuck in a garage with a madman who just shoved a shovel through someone's head. It's a cramped space, and shooting Jack doesn't seem to do anything. The only option then is the car. We don't need an explanation for why Ethan can drive a car. If you're 30 or somewhere around 30 in America, it's assumed you can drive a car. He's given tools with which to accomplish a goal, and you need to find those tools to escape the situation. They're tools anyone can use, a car and a knife. So when the game limits your options, it can be really great, which makes me wish they kept Ethan crippled in this way. He needs to use his environment to get out of a situation rather than masterfully shooting his way out of it. The first proper boss battle against Jack gives you a chainsaw after the obligatory shoot him in the head phase. And this is also a good use of the materials provided. I have other problems with the fight, but it's believable that a dweeb like Ethan would be able to use a chainsaw. It is not believable, though, that he would be able to fire any gun as expertly as his military-trained wife. And while we're on what the game does well, I want to go over how the game could have used Ethan's unfamiliarity with guns to its advantage. The first part of the game can stay. Ethan's still weirdly unfazed by the satanic monuments using dead horse parts as decorations, but again, doofus protagonists are standard for horror. He has a knife and environmental tools to fight his way out of tough situations. This would make the stealth segments in the house more tense because he wouldn't have a gun to fall back on and would instead have no option but to run and hide. The game wouldn't be able to include as many molded, but that's okay. The large number of them in the game now means they become normal and not at all scary. If Ethan only had to face one or two in the house with a knife, then the player would be properly unsettled by the idea that there might be one around any corner, and would make them a little scarier later when they showed up in large numbers and, as it is now, just aren't that scary. The chainsaw segment could stay, I guess, and then, in order to counter the bugs and fight Marguerite, Ethan could find the plans for the flamethrower and then have to find the materials to make it. It would strain credulity a bit to have Ethan be able to assemble a flamethrower, but he has the plans, and there's no condition the game gives us about characters who need training as a craftsman. Also, this weapon is different enough from a gun that it wouldn't need the same explanation to use as Mia's training insists the guns need. It would be more meaningful too, since the flamethrower would feel much more powerful than Ethan's other weapons, and you could also find a way to use the flamethrower to fight Marguerite. Finally, how great would it feel to finally kill all those damn bugs if you couldn't somehow kill them with a gun when you first found them? Speaking of Marguerite, how the fuck does she die? I mean, it's a big plot point that the cure calcifies the infection in those who are too far gone. But you don't have the cure yet when you fight her. Did I miss something? Anyway, when you get the cure, you could then actually find Zoe in the trailer. Then the phone call would be much more unnerving, since up until this point, it's only been Zoe calling you. Lucas could have Mia, and that could be your motivation to go to the party. Zoe could either help you or have to wait in the trailer, but then at least you'd have met Zoe before you decide who to cure. I mean, as it is, you're choosing between some woman you met 2 minutes ago and your wife who you just found alive after you thought she'd been dead for 3 years. How is this even a choice? I mean, this would still be obvious, but you'd have at least met Zoe and formed a small bond with her, right? The Lucas portion is already light on guns, and it's also the part with the most inspired puzzle of the game, and an example of how good the game can be when it doesn't rely on guns. First, you have to go through a puzzle section as the other worst character who dies at the end. But because you've seen the VHS as Ethan, you have a leg up when Lucas puts you into the same puzzle, and you can skip enough of it to avoid a fiery death. I really liked this moment. As Ethan, I started towards the cask for the handle as I did in the VHS, but then remembered the cask lets oil all over the ground, so I turned around and opened the small box on the wall with a code I wasn't supposed to have yet. On replaying the game, it's a little unfortunate that the game doesn't let you pull a winding key out of the oil barrel. It would mean Ethan dies if you did it that way, but I think that could be a cool moment. Ethan dies in a fire while the player is forced to stare at loser tattooed on his arm. After the puzzle, you free Mia and would be attacked by Jack, just as you are in the game already, and the battle can either be Ethan forced to burn the house down around Jack with the flamethrower, or more interestingly, can switch to Mia's point of view, who has a gun. Maybe Lucas dropped one, or it could have busted out of a chest or something when Jack attacked the shack. I admit I don't know exactly how this would happen. And Ethan's left to wonder how his wife can use a weapon so well, which would also provide more of a reason that Ethan might want to choose to save Zoe. He could be thinking, how much else has she hid from me? This is also where the game could have turned the damsel in distress trope on its head if Mia here is forced to save Ethan. They missed an opportunity a little later too. If the game had Mia using a gun here, after Ethan had been forced to make his way through the house without one, it could use the precedent it set that characters need training in firearms to its advantage, rather than its detriment as it currently stands. Then, Ethan has to use one of the cures to kill Jack, which gives him the same choice of who to save. The flashback could play out as it already does, and the machine gun here could feel so powerful, and you could get a sense of just how much more powerful Mia is than Ethan, rather than the only difference being that she has a badge. Then, when you find Ethan as Mia, Evelyn could show up and attack Ethan. Remember, she already loves Mia. And Mia would be forced to run and find more of a cure to kill Evelyn.
Now go kill that little bitch.
No. Mia! No!
This would also avoid the part where Ethan is staring through the glass right at Evelyn, and then turns around and exclaims,
Okay, you little bitch. Where the fuck are you?
"She's right there, Ethan, you fucking idiot." I mean, I get why he can't go kill her right away, but why does he wonder where she is? He just saw her. And I know Evelyn can create hallucinations, but I don't think Ethan has any reason to know that. I mean, he knows she's behind the whole thing, kind of, but doesn't know how specifically. The next section can play out exactly as it already does, except you're playing as Mia rather than Ethan. Mia has a reason to be overpowered, and she has a reason to be angry at Evelyn specifically. This seems like such an obvious choice, rather than the game text awkwardly mentioning that Mia's items are Ethan's now, that I almost think this is how the game originally played out, but Capcom chose to turn control back over to Ethan for some reason. It would also help explain why Redfield drops the gun that kills Evelyn rather than use it himself. I'm actually still not sure what happened here. Did he drop it or something serendipitously right next to Ethan? I don't know.
Playtime's over.
Whatever happened there, Ethan is wonderfully deluded about how these guys are here to clean the mess up. And I can't help but see the irony in Ethan's voiceover at the end. Yeah, maybe things are looking up for him, but we know the truth about Umbrella Corp in the world of Resident Evil. I actually kind of love the end voiceover for its cheesiness. So I don't want this to come off as I think every game needs some explanation as to why characters can use guns. Instead, I think Resident Evil 7 insists that characters need that explanation due to its treatment of Mia. It's even worse if you take the entire franchise into account, since I'm pretty sure every other player character is highly trained, which makes me wonder even more why Ethan the schlub is able to use a gun so competently. The only possible reason Ethan can use a gun without explanation, and Mia can't, is because Ethan is a man, and Mia is a woman. As far as I'm concerned, this is a huge oversight born not of malicious aforethought, but of accepting the norm without question. And as I hope I've shown, the game could have avoided this sexist kind of thinking and been a better game in other areas as well, all with assets the game already has in place. It's still a great game, but it missed an opportunity to be even greater.
They say that when one door closes, another opens. Well, a door closed tonight. And what a long night it was. But not just for me. Mia and I weren't the only victims here. So were the Bakers. It was that thing, Evelyn, who made them that way. But now Evelyn's dead. And these guys are here to clean up the mess. I had just come to terms with losing Mia. But now she's back and wants to start over. Put all this behind us. Maybe this is where the next door opens.
For anyone who actually watches this, thanks so much for staying till the end. This is the first time I've tried a video like this, and while I enjoyed the process, it took a lot out of me. I'd appreciate any honest feedback, and I'm looking forward to making more videos in the future. Hope to see you then.
I told you to stay out of here!